We look forward to the conversation today. I do want to let everybody know that it is going to be recorded, so be aware of that. I'm going to introduce our moderator, which is going to bring a unique perspective to this panel today from his 30 years of experience. So our moderator is Robert Everett. Robert, give a wave. Okay. He is a native North Carolinian. There are a few of us around. A civil engineer graduate from NC State with an MBA from UNC. But we won't hold that UNC thing against him here. Okay. 30 experience in the construction industry, and many of you know him already. He founded NEMA about 9 years ago to help owners and developers manage and facilitate their projects. They have all kind of market sector work, everything from multifamily to hospital, mixed use. I think there's not a project type that NEMA could not assist you with, so let me put it that way. He has a wife and son, and I was interested to find out that his son has gotten him on skates on an ice hockey rink. So if you see Rob in the future, ask him about that. I think that's probably an interesting story. But thank you for attending the program. I hope you get a lot out of it today. I'm going to turn it over to Rob, and he'll introduce our panelists for today.
Well, thank you, Jan. And I did clarify it's almost 30 years. I'm not quite 30 years, but yes, you got to balance the time and the age here. But thank you for the intro. And yes, my son has forced me to learn to ice skate growing up in Eastern North Carolina, as he's on a hockey team and I get to help coach his team. So I had to learn to skate and learn the basics of hockey, but a lot of fun. But again, thanks, Jen, and thanks, NAIOP, for having this event. I mean, it's so relevant, and the focus on construction is so critical right now in where we are in a relevant topic. So thank you for putting this together. Even in my short, almost 30 years in the construction industry, I've seen the market shift and the contractor's role change. Even, you go way back in the day, even predating my experience, contractors weren't brought in until it was time to go to construction. It was time to actually get it built. But as it has evolved, and as complex as projects are, how cost sensitive they are, how critical they are, there's no one better in the market, or very few, if any, better in the market that knows the how-tos and the how much of projects. So the contractor role has steadily increased. In management, we often get contractors involved, and owners often get contractors involved, from concepts and schematics as early as they can. And when it's set up right, it's a win-win for everybody involved. So their role in the delivery process over the decades has substantially grown, and I've seen that, and it's been helpful. As everybody knows, it's the biggest piece of a pro forma is the construction cost, and that's what's put them at the biggest role, or a big part of the role of the planning. And with the pro forma having the biggest piece and the biggest cost on construction, construction is also changing. It's very dynamic. It's up, it's down hourly, it's up, certainly daily, monthly, weekly, annually. The costs are constantly changing, and it's more important than ever for owners and developers and people tackling capital projects to understand where costs are and how to build it, because it takes, as you know, months and years in the planning before you actually go to construction. And so the dynamic of cost and planning is more critical. So it's more important than ever to have the contractor at the table. The number one question I used to get, and I'm sure contractors get it too, is what's this going to cost? Just give me an idea. How much is this? They show you a napkin sketch or a concept. It's interesting in the COVID world, which we're focused on today. What's changed? The question now that I get more, and I'm interested on the panelists that they get it, is what are costs doing? How are they trending? What's changing? Are they going up or down? So the cost question has shifted just a little bit. So I hope we can explore, some of those questions today. I hope the audience is able to see some of the micro and macro issues in there with constructions and cost. And I hope it informs you. I hope the purpose and the goal of this is it informs how you approach your projects, that you take away something meaningful here. and how you time your projects, how you plan your projects and set up your projects. Thankfully and luckily, we've got an incredible team of panelists, the best of the best here. And it's a good mix. It's deliberately a good mix of size firms and market sectors. So let me introduce the team and do my best here I won't cover all their depth of background and knowledge, but I'll hit the highlights. We've got Baker Glasgow. Baker is the vice president. Baker, you can raise your hand if it's not obvious to everybody. He's the vice president of construction for Clancy and Faze Construction Company here. Clancy has 5 offices in the Southeast. They're based here in Raleigh. Volume in Raleigh alone is about $270 million a year. Annually, corporately, they're about $650 million. So their primary markets are mixed use, multifamily, K-12, public, religious, office, just to name a few, higher ed, hospitality. Baker's been in the business for 22 years, so it's time flies when you're having fun. Baker's got 2 children. One is only 5 months old, so probably not getting a lot of sleep. And if I had an electronic buzzer to kind of nudge you if you start nodding off, I would use it, but forgive that. But congrats on the 5-month-old. Then we have Paul Sullivan. Paul is the senior vice president and North Carolina business unit leader for Gilbane. Paul is responsible for the North Carolina and the Virginia business units. He's been with Gilbane since 2010 and in the construction market since 2008. Gilbane, a little larger in that they have an annual revenue of about $6 billion a year. Here in this market, they did about $400 million. Paul is the father of 3 and an avid Gator fan. Paul was actually my neighbor briefly. He was moving in and we overlapped before we moved out. Gilbane focuses on healthcare, public work, and life sciences, corporate, higher ed. Gilbane has 50 offices across the country, so a big touch on the market, and 2 offices right here in North Carolina. Next, we have Eric Perkinson. Eric is the Vice President Division Manager for Brassfield and Gorey. Eric oversees the Raleigh's office commercial division here, responsible for securing the division's work and supporting the project teams operationally. Brassfield and Gorey have 12 offices throughout the Southeast, annual revenue of about $4 billion, North Carolina revenue, South Carolina revenue about $550 million. They have a wide swath of healthcare, office, multifamily, hospitality, industrial, mission critical, science, technology, education, and government. So not much they don't do there. Eric's been in the business for 22 years. Fun fact, he enjoys playing golf, but more fun than golf, he has a teenage daughter and he loves to intimidate their boyfriends and heckle them. I'm glad I don't have to live through that or worry about that. I'm sure he's quite tough on them and they deserve it, as he should. Certainly last but not least, we've got Tanner Holland. Tanner, you wave your hand, and President and CEO of McDonald York Building Company. McDonald York has an annual revenue of somewhere between $80 and $100 million. Mostly large interior work is one of their specialties. Market sector is life science, workplace interiors, office building, and healthcare. Tanner's got over 20 years of construction experience, primarily here in the Triangle. Tanner's wife is a twin, he told me, and not only is she a twin, but they have twin boys. So I know Tanner is staying busy. Thanks each of you for your commitment to the service in the industry. That's meaningful. It helps us all get our jobs done. You guys are on the front lines. You know what's going on out there daily, almost hourly. So what you say today is meaningful, and we appreciate it. So thank you for your time today. We do want to hear from the audience. There's a chat option to ask questions. We'll try to get through those and filter those and put them in front of the panel. So feel free to use your chat feature, and we'll get to as many as we can. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm out of breath. First question, Paul, I'll point to you, but anybody can jump in. Many of us have not forgotten the Great Recession, the 08-09 recession. still haunts us, right? It'll probably, affect us the rest of our career, and we fear the next one. How is the current market in pullback similar or different than what we experienced after '08 into '09 and '10?
Yeah, good question. So I think some of the main components of that is in terms of where cash lies, right? So the private sector is really strong in this current market and continues to be in this recession, which is different than traditionally in past recessions in an '08. So there's been a run, obviously, to the private side with the public sector being challenged. On top of the fact that labor is still continuing to be upheld pretty strong, in particular in this market, because of the backlogs that exist and the continued growth of certain sectors down here. So we're not seeing a decrease in labor costs, and because of inventories kind of staying where they are, we're seeing some of the material pricing being upheld as well. So we're not seeing a real crash in some of the costs and fees that maybe we saw back in '08. There's certainly plenty of steady competition out there as people have had to shift their markets, which are driving some fees down a little bit, but probably not near to the extent that we saw in kind of really that '08 and '09 market. Now, that's also dependent upon the various markets that we're in, but I would say because of where we're positioned geographically, we're in a much better place than we are in other parts of the country, say the Northeast and so forth, that were impacted a little bit differently from a COVID standpoint.
Yeah, no, I agree. We haven't seen that crash. I guess we're nervous about it, but any other thoughts from the panel on how this market's different?
Yeah, I'd say that it really comes down to the banks, and I think that's why the private market has stayed pretty strong, is because the banks have stayed in relatively good shape, meaning that they're able to lend. People still need a place to park their money. They need investments, and why not continue to put it into the triangle, put it into developments. So just the fact that the banks have been able to stay relatively healthy, I think that's really propped up the private market. And again, completely depends on which sector you're in.
Yeah, we do a market survey, and I've noticed it is very sector specific where you're seeing it. And I do think, to your point too, Baker, it's, interest rate policy was very aggressive this time, and it was a little slower before, and that has helped prop it up.
Sure.
Any other thoughts from the panel?
It just seems like,
go ahead, Eric.
It really just seems like 2009 was a hard stop for everything, where this time it's a select stop and a pause, and now it's kind of seems like it's ramping back up. So.
Yep, it is. Unfortunately, we didn't have to get shut down in our industry. We've been able to keep going as well. I think has helped. Pre-COVID, next question. Pre-COVID, we were seeing substantial escalations, and substantial in my mind, what we were seeing and what we were trying to factor into pro formas and budgets is 6% a year, or what we often refer to as 0.5% per month. How has that changed since COVID? Are we still seeing that? Is it inverse of that? Who can speak to kind of where escalation has been since COVID?
I'll jump in. I think to use from the term from 2008, 2009, the shovel-ready projects we're seeing are flat, or even you're getting a discount from certainly pre-COVID pricing. I think that's just contractors or subcontractors trying to ensure backlog with an uncertain future. But the further forward looking you are, some of these projects you might be budgeting today, but the sub won't be on deck for a year or 2 years out. You're just not seeing that cut. I don't know that it's 6%, but they're probably in the 4 to 5%, still just hedging against that same uncertainty that they're willing to take on a short-term project. They're not willing to take on a long-term.
Yeah, I agree with Eric. I mean, the projects that we've had that are shovel ready, we've been able to get a little bit of discounts from the subs because it gives them that backlog going forward. But anything that's not a guaranteed project, 6 months out, no permits, et cetera, we're still seeing an escalation. However, I would say, again, it somewhat depends on the market. I mean, the mixed use multifamily seems to be continuing to go up in price, while your commercial projects and public projects, I think that you're going to see even probably a decrease in price just out of competition, where, you know, you show up to a RFP and pre-COVID, there's 5 CMs or contractors there for a $15 million job. Now we're seeing 15. So just that naturally is going to just help drive down pricing.
I think 6% is probably a little aggressive. I think, as Eric said, probably 4 to 5 is where we see in some of those long-range plans. If we go through a second or third wave of COVID, is there an impact on some of the factories from a supply standpoint? Could that impact things next year? Obviously, that's a potential. I think the only place, as Baker said, kind of the lumber side of life is certainly impacting multifamily. But anything internationally from an equipment standpoint will have some challenges, but domestically we've seemed to manage it pretty well.
That a little bit leads into my next question. The inflation and escalation is nuanced differences. They're two different things. Inflation shows up fundamentally in the broader global market due to global policies and changes in interest rates and things, where escalation that we were just talking about is really, in my mind, more about the local market, how busy it is, how over busy it is, what the capacity is, what's shaping the market, sort of piggyback. And Tanner, I know you're in the local market as much as anybody, or primarily. What's driving this market? Is it inflation sort of globally? Is it escalation or lack of, or how do you see it influencing pricing?
Yeah, again, local market and then select project size. I mean, we're really not seeing much. We've all heard about the aluminum, which, you know, increase there on sheet goods, aluminum. You know, we've had a few increases here and there, but we're not getting the letters from anybody talking about increases from a global market standpoint. You know, from escalation, I mean, with labor shortage was a problem pre-COVID. Labor shortage is a problem during this pandemic, and it will be there when we get out. You know, hopefully here in this late spring, early summer, whatever that might look like. But, you know, I do believe that, you know, as many of the panelists have said, there's a sense of absorption that contractors, subcontractors will take just to create backlog and opportunities to secure their foothold in the market. And then I think as we get later into the year, we could see locally some of those escalations come in, you know, from price increases, labor, folks getting busy, maybe raising their prices.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting on the escalation side. You can call this really a layered question. I'm thinking ad lib here, but there is this little fear in the market that it's all going to come out at once, right? There's this hold on, let's see, let's wait, and then all of a sudden, whatever, first quarter, second quarter, everybody's going to turn loose at once. Does anybody see that, or what does that do to the market if everybody turns loose at once?
I'd say that is a real thing. I mean, it seems like a lot of things are breaking into Q2, Q3, something like that of next year. So it's going to be really interesting. I mean, that's why, you know, especially with these projects that were pushed right around, we were ready to start projects in March, April, and they were pushed. And that was the emphasis I had with the owners was, you know, now or never. I think you're going to get the best possible deal now, because if you push your job, you know, out until that time that everything else starts to pop, you're not going to get any of those potential discounts. And so we've been successful with a couple of projects of getting them going. But yeah, it's really going to be interesting to see what happens Q2, Q3, as it seems like a lot of projects that were just kind of hanging out in the back burner. You know, the equity group's kind of been making sure that everything's not gonna just go away. It will be very interesting, Rob, and I think that again the triangle area is just going to continue to grow. I mean, people now more than ever are moving here. When people move here, it means more churches, more offices, more schools, more places to live. So I think that COVID has only escalated that migration to the triangle.
And I'll bridge there. If anybody else has anything to add to that, but a lot of you have multiple offices, not just the triangle. Some wider spread than others, but how is the triangle different? Are you on? Is your fingers on the pulse, or are your fingers on the pulse of other markets? And we're not so interested in what those markets are, but how do they compare to the triangle? What are we seeing different here in the triangle than other markets, good or bad?
I'll start. I mean, we have 5 offices, and Charlotte, Wilmington, Raleigh. It all seems to feel about the same. Newport News is not that much different either. We do have an office in Orlando, and I would say that does feel different a little bit from the triangle, just because Orlando is so dependent on hospitality, the theme park world and tourism, and when tourism goes down, the whole market somewhat goes down. So I've definitely just felt it when I go to Orlando. But, in terms of the North Carolina and even, parts of Virginia, they all still feel somewhat the same, but people are still continuing to move here, and, jobs are moving from California here. So, I'm sure Paul and Eric can speak a little more broadly because they're in a lot more different markets, but I would just say that one area that's really affected by tourism, you can tell a difference.
I think because of our diversity in our market, it certainly helps in a major way. Obviously, with the push from a life science biotech standpoint, that's a big piece of what's going on here and helping drive a lot of different things in a lot of different ways and what other industry and opportunities that brings. But I would say from basically almost Philly and DC South to Baker's Point, most of the markets feel pretty strong because of what they're because of the diversity within the markets. So through the Southeast, I'd say you got some softening and so forth in Houston and some other areas, maybe the Midwest and a little bit of the Northeast. But from Philly South, it is pretty strong across the board for sure. And there's really been an interest in kind of secondary and tertiary markets from an equity standpoint and others. So money is continuing to go into those areas versus kind of some of those urban centers.
Yeah, definitely. The Southeast is strong, and we had a project that was on hold in September. The main investor was out of Germany, called the local developer and said he didn't know where Raleigh Durham was pre-COVID, and that was all he was reading about was Raleigh Durham. And so they dusted off the plans, and we think we'll break ground next quarter. But same thing, we're thankful to be in the Southeast where construction was deemed essential, and really haven't seen a slowdown. Dallas probably the most slowdown, and that was exacerbated by they were doing a lot of hospitality, or had a lot of hospitality work planned, and we saw that obviously took a big hit. So but all the southeastern cities are kind of cranking.
Yeah, and no doubt we're very blessed and fortunate, the folks here, to live and work in this market, and that's good news, right? The hidden negative in that, which is still positive, is prices aren't moving. Everybody's not desperate, but that would be worse, right? As much as we like lower prices, we don't want that situation. So it's net good news.
Oh, Rob, you love low prices. Come on.
We do love low prices, but we like, but we dislike a really bad market more. So
that's right.
Well, one thing we've noticed is we're talking to clients and helping navigate strategically through the planning process. And I'm interested too, pre-COVID market, we keep anchoring. I mean, that's the purpose of this call, which is great. It's still so relevant, is the budget, right? So, we were internally at NEMA, we were asking ourselves on our next survey, how much does the pre-COVID budget matter? Or have people moved on from the pre-COVID budget and accepted the new market? What do you guys think about that? Or people, or your clients, or what are you seeing as far as the need to anchor back to pre-COVID versus have they moved on and it's a new normal?
I think when anybody does an estimate, whether you're a developer or a contractor or sub, you're going to look back at your prior similar projects. And I don't think, labor production rates haven't changed, and really labor rates in this market haven't changed. Your commodities may be down some, and then you're looking at, what is escalation going to be? And so I don't know if you're anchoring off of it, but a lot of those fundamentals haven't changed. Still a quantity of materials and how fast you can put them in, and times of labor and a material rate. The things that are changing is how much profit or overhead do I want to cover on the job just to lock it down. So I don't know that it's, hey, I'm taking the last budget and adding 5% is really not the what we see. It's more, let's look at what it used to cost and what has changed incrementally, and then let's take that knowledge and apply it forward.
I would say it seems like commodities got a little more volatile. Just some material pricing it seems to be jumping around a little bit more than usual. But to Eric's point, I mean, it doesn't seem like labor has changed that much. And going back to that question about what's the difference between now and 2008, I mean, a subcontractor pre-COVID is putting 15-20% P&O on it, and now they're putting maybe 10 to 15. So it's not like 08 where they're putting 0 just to keep people busy. It's just a completely different world where it's really more about how much of P&O you put on it versus how much money you don't want to lose.
Mm-hmm.
But
and honestly, I agree with both. Go ahead.
No, sorry, Paul.
Tanner.
I think that one thing that I've noticed is that I think folks have come to appreciate maybe what they are putting to the bottom line, and I don't want to say greed, but I think that there's been a little bit of level setting that's occurred, maybe what that return on their investment really looks like, and that's at every level. That's at the owner level all the way down, because I think that we may have gotten a little over our skis a little bit and trying to make certain profit margins. And I think that this situation that we've all been faced with across the board, I think has put us in a little better place to understand what's important. Stability, security, putting money in the coffers for rainy days is certainly part of it. But, and then some of the money that's coming in too, we're seeing, institutional money coming in, the folks may have been in the bond market, it's now coming into the real estate market. And, their return rates are a little bit different coming from bond to stable business deals, which the Southeast offers a lot. But I think there's a little bit of that behind the scenes going on relative to the performance.
Yeah, it's interesting. And as we deal with clients, it's project specific. If they're still on hold from pre-COVID, they're anchoring the pre-COVID prices. If they've moved on, they moved on. It's project specific. I'll move on to the next question. Other than the current economic pullback that we're all sort of talking about, what other fundamental changes are you seeing in the marketplace? I mean, labor, subcontractor capacity, supply chain. What other than the obvious economic slowdown? What other moving fundamentals do you see in the construction market? And before you jump in, somebody asked a question, and it'll piggyback here with this question: how has unemployment affected construction prices? You can maybe weave that in from the audience.
For me, it's still young folks are not going into the trades. We've seen that. We're starting to go to high schools and middle schools to get students excited about construction. And, perhaps the change in education of, gosh, why am I spending $100,000 for public education online, is when I could, I had the unfortunate luck to pay a plumber $500 to fix a leak Thanksgiving morning. It took him about 15 minutes. I'm thinking, gosh, that's a great occupation for somebody that doesn't really want to go to college. And so we just don't see a lot of, there's not a huge influx of applications because of unemployment. Certainly everybody getting a check from the federal government didn't help that. But, and then you just, all of the experienced foremen leveling up, I mean, they're aging out. We're still seeing that. So we're having to figure out as an industry how to replace that talent. That was there pre-COVID, and it still exists.
this may be an opportunity where because higher education is being so impacted so greatly and the applicants to four-year universities, obviously a lot of folks have run to the community college, which is unusual in a traditional recession. They're usually going to education in a different fashion. So hopefully this will draw in more of those technical skills. And when you think about what they're making coming out after 2 years versus what a lot of them are making after 4 years, I think a lot of us are hopeful that this will be a little bit of a shift in support those skilled trades, but obviously we're years away from really feeling that impact in so many ways. So, but in terms of other fundamentals, I think because we kept rolling in so many ways, shapes, and form, we're not seeing a huge shift in a lot of the fundamentals impacting our business, really.
A lot more hand sanitizer.
And thermometers.
Yeah.
Wash down stations.
Well, I am hopeful that because construction was deemed essential, that our industry will get a fair look, the importance that we provide to our economy, to, the list goes on. And so, I'm hopeful that some of these kids that may have been told that they need to be sitting behind a desk and doing tech and video games and making a lot of money doing all that they may remember this and look at it from what's more realistic, what can be a little bit more stable in the sense of the overall economy. So, there may be something good that comes from that, again, relative to the labor force.
Sure. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how I spoke early in opening comments about how it's changed in the last 20, 30, 40 years. It's going to be interesting to see how our industry changes in the next decades. There's a sense that we're always busy, right? I don't ever meet anybody, even in a slower market, that's not busy, and often more busy in a slower market in general. But the question is, how busy, or what are you busy on? And I just had I thought it'd be interesting to hear, how busy are you planning, chasing pre-con versus how busy are you actually going to construction and building since COVID?
I'd say we are probably more busy in the planning, pre-con, those types of things, because again, the jobs that were supposed to start didn't start. And so it became a job that was ready to start became a pre-con exercise. So yeah, I think that we are definitely seeing plenty of work and opportunity down the line. And again, these groups from all over are coming here, and it's, it's not strange to see, California area codes calling you, just because, as Eric said, everybody's talking about this area, and whether it's just putting together something so they can figure out if they're going to purchase the land or not. I mean, that's honestly probably half of some of our staff in pre-con. That's half the time they do, is just putting together budgets for someone to figure out if they want to buy land or not, if the performer works. So that does take a lot of time, and it's just something that we do. But yeah, I would say more busy in planning and pre-con, and so that's why we're hopeful that things will continue to go in a good direction, and just shows that we don't see why construction pricing would do anything except continue to trend upward as there's just so much activity.
Rob, we're equally busy in construction and pre-con. We quickly shifted resources from projects that got put on hold to, the data centers, the life science labs, distribution, and really saw Q3, all those projects most of those projects that were put on hold, getting dusted back off and back into pre-con with, Baker mentioned a Q1, Q2 starting next year. And so it's, now the pre-con groups are busy estimating those again, as I think every designer must have gotten a call in September, and because October, November, December was just this influx of, hey, I need a new price.
By Christmas.
Yeah, by Christmas, or hey, we'll give them to you on the 18th or 19th. Can you have it to us by the 2nd? But anyway, and then those other markets that have continued on, It's really kept everybody busy. So
I think I felt come August, the spigot got turned back on in a pretty substantial fashion, and in probably beyond a pre-COVID cycle. The pre-con groups are incredibly busy, and in particular with the shovel-ready work, it's interesting. I think the timelines are getting even shorter and shorter to get things going too, right? So you would have thought that maybe COVID would have given people a little bit of a breather from a pre-con and design standpoint, and that's not the case. I'd tell you it's getting crunched even more. So that exacerbates some other elements, but it's certainly exciting when we think about where we were in kind of June and July and where things were trending. So to Eric and Baker's point, come the start of Q2 and through Q2, I think it's going to be super busy around here, and there's more on its way. And I think the other part is the size and the scale of some of this stuff too. It's not small, it's large.
It's interesting, Paul, what you said about August. It seems almost like as the numbers went down in the summer, the confidence grew again for projects to start. And now, even though the numbers are going back up, they're reinvested. You can't pull the plug now. Plus, there's a vaccine around the corner. It's, everybody's committed, so let's just continue to move forward. But it was interesting. I mean, we literally like watching numbers and know that as numbers dropped this summer, the confidence increased and projects got more life to them. It was interesting.
A more future look. Looking past it.
I just throw in that we got 3 or 4 companies in the RTP that are either involved in vaccines or therapeutics. So people are seeing that and just flocking here. So.
And piggybacking too on what Eric said, as far as projects that went on hold, have you seen most of those come off hold, at least in pre-con, or some of them, or what percent are still sitting on hold and not doing anything right now?
I'd say in our Raleigh office, 100% of them have come back. Well, excuse me, never mind. We have a gym that did not come back. Actually, no, I think it is maybe coming back now, just in a different capacity. But senior living, mixed use, multifamily, all have come back. I'd say in our Virginia office does a lot of hospitality, and I would say 1 or 2 of those have gone away indefinitely. Building hotels is not really exciting right now. We had a 1 or 2 shell office buildings that people were looking at, and as capital markets have kind of frozen their spending, those are either getting put on the shelf or getting repurposed to a different project type. But yeah, I'd say mostly in Raleigh they've come back.
Same for us, and actually pulled all the awards since March, and I was shocked. 12% of the awards were hospitality, and those were major mega hotels, resorts that I guess have a 2 or 3 year cycle, that everybody just thinks, well, this is going to go away, and by the time it's done, it'll be great to go ahead and have this coming online. So
that's good to hear.
In the history books, I hope so. I mean, Tanner, what are you seeing? You specialize in the sort of the large interiors. I know, we don't have to delve into the design aspects of what's different post-COVID in interiors and office space, but are people waiting and seeing what that is? Are people holding on interior upfits, or is that wide open?
Yeah, well, it depends on the market sector. Our life science group is, we're seeing great activity there. We're actually seeing clients, repurpose their office for life sciences tenants. Budgeting there is daily. A lot of opportunities in that sector. The office, the workplace interiors, there's still that sense of, when are folks coming back? And a lot of the large corporate clients that we have is June, is no sooner than July, those type comments. So they are talking about projects on the interiors on the corporate side, but they're talking about it in different ways than we've seen before, relative to densification, spatial arrangement, the real estate. I mean, several of them were overpopulated in their head counts, and now they're going to revisit that. You've got some clients that are just looking at it, trying to figure out, from their office standpoint, what do they need? Are they going to be able to get people back? So the workplace is still a little bit up in the air, although, I think I've read a survey where 80% of the workforce who's working remotely miss at least that office interaction. And so, I don't know that we're going to get ourselves back to a 5-day-a-week type working environment, but we'll be back to a working environment, in my opinion, here come summer, which will move some of those projects. Our runways on these interior projects are so short. I joke all the time about how much the design teams get as much time as the construction team gets. And so, we really try to watch what the design firms are up to, and they're starting to see opportunities for space planning and concept planning, which, they need to be if they're looking at trying to have product ready for that June, July timeframe. So again, I think it's market sector. Now, retail, repurposing that, don't know what that's going to look like. If you're in the warehouse world, what do they say? Right ready warehouse. There's a lot of activity in that market. And it's, the interiors part of that is a small piece because it's mostly shell space. But so again, it's good to see that there are those projects that are in that short runway, meaning that they would start and finish, maybe by the beginning of Q3 are being discussed.
And we probably just have a few more minutes, and I've got more questions than we have time, but material and supply chain was a big question mark when COVID came out. It had a lot of people worried. How is that affecting project costs and schedules right now? Are you seeing it having a big impact, not a big impact, or what do you see in general with material supply chains as it relates to COVID?
I think it seemed to be something that was very scary at the onset of COVID, and was somewhat of a real thing right at the very beginning. Plant shutting down. I would say now that that's somewhat stabilized. I have not, you get an occasional issue, light fixtures from China, et cetera, et cetera. Some stuff here and there, but what I always think is it's really just part of what we do as contractors and construction managers. There's just always constantly stuff that you have to overcome, that the subcontractors you're dealing with have to figure out another way to source it. I joke about it, but when Trump did tariffs way back when, I think they gave us a lot of practice of how to find material from different places prior to COVID even starting. And so to me, I don't really see it as an additional challenge. It's just something that we've dealt with. I think it was really more of a scary thing right when COVID hit. I don't know what everybody else thinks about that. It kind of depends on what products you're sourcing and from where. But to me, I think it's kind of settled down.
I agree. It was kind of hit or miss on which factory, shut down due to COVID, back in the spring. But now I think we've actually seen some improvement. Double T's don't take 6 or 7 months now. You can get them in, I think they're telling you 5, which is probably 5 months. And we're getting some HVAC equipment. They're all beating their dates.
Yeah. I think factories figured out how to work around it. Stagger the shifts and honestly, the virus, it's very serious, but we know a lot more about it right now. So it's since you do testing, and if you get it, depending on your situation, you're probably going to be able to come through it. So, just knowing a lot more about it, everybody's just been able to be more intelligent about how they work and be able to keep things going because, as we've seen, it's not slowing down. Construction is not stopping. And therefore, there's still a demand for it.
Well, and real quick, anybody that knows lumber, it has been going up. And I think it was a lot for some of the reasons we're talking about. And there's a question in the audience about lumber prices. We're in 30 seconds, maybe one person that can speak most to lumber prices. Where do you see them going, or where are they relative to where they were pre-COVID?
Well, yeah, we buy a lot of lumber now. Yeah, they definitely spiked, and it was really interesting. A lot of that had to do with the factory shutdowns. And then the most interesting part was the do-it-yourselfers. So Lowe's and all those places were just selling out of lumber because everybody was building tree houses and, because they were stuck at home. And so lumber went through the roof because Canada was predicting everything to slow down, and it actually had, taken some factories offline, and it was the exact opposite. Construction continued, and an additional demand from the do-it-yourselfer. So it shot through the roof, but it's starting to come down now, and we're actually, we've been told March, April next year it will even be lower than it is now. So I forget the numbers. Somewhere, if you look at an index, they went up to 700. We're seeing it now at 550. We've been told maybe 450 somewhere around March, April. So that has also stabilized a little bit, and I think it will continue, in what I'm told, continue to trend down. We've even, when we put budgets together, put numbers assuming that it's going to go down, because otherwise the performance looks really bad if you plug in numbers of today's prices. So
yeah, lumber was our saving grace compared to other structured costs. So if that went away, we are in trouble. Question from the audience: given the slowdown in public work, higher ed, and retail, have you seen issues with any defaults of subcontractors? Any subcontractor defaults? And a follow-on question: are commercially focused subs crossing over to other markets like multifamily good buildings?
It was something we were really worried about as we went into the cash crunch, and cash became king at the start of COVID. But with construction in particular here, obviously deemed essential and keep enrolling, in particular the local and the regional subs, they were able to do just fine. So we have not seen a dramatic impact there. The question is, when you're dealing with a national and they took a big hit in New York and so forth, or California, what did that do to their balance sheet? So we definitely have some concerns about the accuracy of balance sheets for, coming into really the first quarter of this past year. But by and large, we really have not seen it, but it was something that we had a really keen eye on, because we thought absolutely it was going to happen in a more substantial fashion, and it really didn't.
Yeah, same with us. And then on the second question on commercial subs going to try multifamily or wood frame, selectively, actually met with a big concrete frame subcontractor yesterday, and as those large office frames are slowing down, they've taken on more podiums that they wouldn't do. So really, there's a bunch of subs out there that do both, but they typically house that wood frame in a separate group, because it's just a different animal. So
I'll wrap up with one question that we deal with, and it's somewhat construction related, somewhat planning related, but municipalities, right? They're notoriously have a different process and timeline, but they're under new restrictions. They're under new protocols. How are you seeing the working with jurisdictions having authority and offices, municipalities? How's that affecting your projects? And kind of close out on that, and any other last comments you might have.
I'd say that there's two different discussions. One is the planning department, and then the other part is the inspection department. And as it relates to the planning, I think that similar to a lot of other industries, COVID has put their initiatives in a pressure cooker. For example, if they wanted to do digital plans, they are now having to do them, whether they were ready to or not. So I think from that perspective, it's good that it's pushed them to go a lot more digital, which hopefully in the long run will expedite. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that really need, planning meetings that they really need to take place face to face, and you need to be pouring over the plans and pointing at things. And so we've seen some projects, honestly, I think, be delayed in terms of a permitting just because everybody can't get together. And then from an inspection standpoint, honestly, I wouldn't say it's necessarily slowed anything down. Everybody's continued to be creative. We FaceTime for inspections from time to time. If some inspectors are a lot more cautious than others, and if they are cautious, we clear out a floor and they go inspect. So I'd say from an inspection standpoint, it really hasn't slowed it much down. But from a planning standpoint, I think that it has slowed down just because you can't go face to face. But at the same time, I think it'll have positive effects in the long run, because they're able to expedite all those things that they've been meaning to do for a while.
Yeah, I would echo just the fact that the field inspections, that just everybody was very accommodating. So I don't think we saw any kind of implications, any major implications from that at all, which has actually been very awesome to see.
Any final comments from the panelists that you're itching to say that I didn't touch with a question before we start to wrap up? And I'll save the loaded question, the multi-million-dollar question of where construction prices are going to be 6 months or a year from now, but what your prediction is. But just any closing comments before we break out into small groups?
No, I'd say thanks for having us. Rob, I think you did a fantastic job. No, I really appreciate it. And, hopefully we're in a good position here in the Southeast and the Triangle, and as population growth continues to come here, so will construction, so will deals. So we're looking forward to 2021 and ready to put 2020 behind us.
Yeah, here.
Yep, in multiple ways. Well, thank you guys. I think it's been enlightening. I think it's been helpful. I think it's informative, and thank you for your time. You guys are certainly the experts and among the best in the market. I know to the audience, each one of us on this panel would certainly be happy to help you talk more about your project specifically, more offline and one-on-one. So feel free to reach out however we can help you navigate those. Don't hesitate to reach out. And as I understand it, we will automatically break out into small groups. I don't think you have to do anything. It's a random subgroup that we can all kind of network and ask further questions and discuss. I think Jessica is going to do that automatically. But with that, thanks for your time and have a great rest of your day.